This increases the likelihood a container will be slashed when hit, even when you're careful. To help solve this problem, a set of toe caps should be attached to the ends of the forks. It's as simple as drilling holes in the forks, which the caps can be screwed into. These toe caps can easily be made from a round steel bar welded to a steel plate. A bolt holds the caps to the forks. Simply place the toe cap onto each fork and tighten securely. The round tips of the toe caps help to prevent damage to the containers. When these toe caps are in place, if a container is hit by the forks, there is a greater chance the container will move out of the way, rather than being punctured. Before you start welding, here's the tools you need: a rubber hammer, a vice grip clamp, an adjustable wrench, side cutters, a paint scraper, a large flathead screwdriver, a Robertson screwdriver, Robertson screws, a 4-inch disc grinder, a wire brush, a welding gun, rasps, safety glasses, a safety respirator, and a marker. Also, you should have steel wool handy to clean the welding rod with before you begin any weld. Slits usually mean serious damage and require immediate attention. Follow these simple steps. 1. Reshape the walls of the container as closely as possible to the original shape. This may require the use of screwdrivers, pliers, or a rubber hammer. Step 2. In order to create a good bond in the finished weld, the two surfaces to be joined must be free of all dirt, dust, oil, moisture, and loose particles. You ensure this by using the 4-inch grinder to buff the surface of the container, forming a V-shaped groove in the slit. Then use air to clean other loose dirt away. Do not use solvents to clean the surface, since they tend to soften the edges, causing a poorly finished weld. Use steel wool to clean the plastic welding rod. Step 3. Holding the torch with the tip 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the container, preheat the container until it is pliable. Also, preheat the welding rod until it is shiny and tacky. Step 4. Lay the first weld at the bottom of the groove. Hold the rod at an angle of 45 degrees to the container and move it up and down slightly so that it barely touches the container. If it's heated sufficiently, the rod will stick to the container. To maintain the correct balance of heat, the torch should be moved in a vertical fanning or waving motion. This heats the rod and container equally. At the same time, the rod should be pressed into the container with a slight downward motion, about 3 pounds pressure. When you see a molten wave where the rod meets the container, the rod should bend and begin to move forward. Since only the outer surface of the rod has become molten and the inner core has remained hard, the welder is able to exert pressure on the rod. This forces it into the bottom of the V-joint to create a permanent bond. To ensure maximum strength in your welds, watch for discoloration of the plastic and for smoke. These are signs that the strength of the weld may be compromised. Also, make sure the air filter on the welding gun is clean and that the surrounding air is free from dust and moisture. Step 5. If the damaged area is wide, you will probably need to make several passes with the welding rod. After the first pass has cooled, clean it with a wire brush. This scores the surface, making it possible for the next weld to hold. Step 6. Reheat the area of the base material you're working on next. To start the second weld, lay it on top of and to one side of the first weld. When welding plastics, a good start is essential. If a weld fails, it is usually at the starting point. Therefore, stagger starting points whenever possible.
And you just want to weld maybe 1/4 or 1/2 inch, then stop and slowly try to pull that rod off of the base material. That will show you exactly how good of a job you're doing in getting both materials to flow together at the same time. If you're achieving that, you're going to have the best possible weld.
You should note that a welded area is 60 to 70% of the original strength of the plastic. However, it does prolong the life of the container.
Once you've completed filling the damaged area, it's time to finish the weld. A 4-inch electric hand grinder is probably the quickest tool to use. It's good to bear in mind that finishing a weld will further decrease the strength of that weld. So if appearance or cosmetics is important to the repair job, then it's perhaps better, or it's most definitely a stronger weld if you can leave it round and not finish it.
Test the welds with a hammer, hitting it hard to be sure the weld will hold.
If through reheating your repair job or through testing your repair job with a hammer, a crack surfaces, treat that as though it were any other damage. You start by cleaning that groove out, preparing a bed for your welding rod to lie, and therefore cleaning it out completely free of dirt, dust, and grease, moisture. Just go back over that spot once everything's cooled, go back over it again, and you shouldn't have any problem.
Nicks in containers should be repaired as part of general maintenance to keep the value in your investment. Sometimes what may appear as a nick may actually be a puncture. Follow this simple method to repair these nicks. Step 1. Use the grinder to clean out the damaged area. When grinding, create a V-shaped groove. Step 2. Clean away all loose materials and dust. Step 3. Use steel wool to clean the plastic welding rod. Step 4. Holding the torch with the tip 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch from the container, preheat the surface of the container and the welding rod to the same temperature. The rod should become shiny and tacky. The container surface should be pliable before proceeding. Step 5. Start welding, directing the heat towards both the container and the welding rod. Hold the rod at an angle of 45 degrees to the container and move it up and down slightly so that it barely touches the container. Fuse the container and the rod together in one continuous weld. After welding, immediately pull the welding rod with a screwdriver or pliers to test the strength of the weld. Step 6. Smooth off the weld with the grinder. Step 1. As before, hammer the container back into its original shape as much as possible. You may need to use a screwdriver as well. Then, grind and clean the slits. Step 2. Begin filling the slits by welding them. Step 3. Rasp off less accessible rough edges, making the surface as smooth and clean as possible. Step 4. Cut a patch to approximate size to cover the slit. Then use the grinder to tailor-fit the patch to cover the damaged area completely. Make sure there is a solid area all around to weld to. Mark on the patch on both sides of the area to be heated. Then bend the patch to fit the shape of the container. Step 5. Using the Robertson screws, secure all 4 corners of the patch to the container to hold it in place for welding. Step 6. Start welding the patch to the container by heating the patch, weld rod, and container surface. Step 7. Using a wire brush, score the first weld, patch, and container to make them ready for the second pass weld. Step 8. Start the second pass weld on the patch. Step 9. Remove all 4 screws that are holding the patch in place. Fill the screw holes with weld compound. Cut the welding rod after filling screw holes. Step 10. After grinding the patch, check for smoothness. Step 11. Check the strength of the patch weld by hitting it with a rubber hammer. The key to successful welding is to remember these 4 essentials. 1. Make sure the surface and the welding rod are at the correct temperature. 2. Be sure to apply the correct pressure when applying the compound. 3. Hold the rod at the correct angle, 45 degrees. 4. Apply the weld at a constant speed. For your own safety, be sure you follow all recommended guidelines for the proper use of the welding equipment. And remember, Following the suggestions for operating the forklift and capping the fork ends are important steps in preventing damage to your valuable containers. This video has been produced and supplied to you by Dynoplast as part of our ongoing commitment to quality for our customers.